Today on The Principal's Office.
It comes as no surprise to some that even prior to the pandemic, black and low-income students were more likely to receive a failing grade than their white and socioeconomically advantaged peers. After JCPS moved to virtual teaching in response to the coronavirus, those gaps grew. In middle school, the failure rate for black students tripled, and for Latinx students it increased fivefold. More than 50% of black, Latinx and multiracial high school students had a failing grade in the fall of 2020, compared to 39% of white students. Educators, activists and parents say the disparity is because of the additional barriers they face while participating in non-traditional instruction. The trend in failing grades shows the pandemic may have made it harder for JCPS to achieve its goal of academic equity between students who have certain advantages and those who don't.
Welcome to the principal's office, some very distinguished guests. First, we want to introduce Mr. Ricky Owens. Ricky Owens is currently the Family Resource Youth Center Coordinator at TJ Middle School. He served in that capacity for the last 25 years. He is also the winner of several prestigious awards in our community for his service, not to mention the Metro Council Black History Award, a Neighborhood Place Jane Shamarley Award, and the prestigious Golden Oar for JCPS employees during his time. We are happy to have Mr. Owens on the show with us, so welcome. We also want to welcome to the show today Idisha Bellamy. Idisha is the COO, Chief Operating Officer at Maryhurst. And when you talk about strategic leadership, when you talk about proactive leadership and being invested in the community, then you talk about Idisha. Idisha has many roles in our community, but one of her favorite, I'm sure, is that of a mother of 5 children, ages 6 through 22. So please welcome Idisha to the show. Welcome. And last but not least, we have Mr. Aaron Sparrow. Aaron is currently the mental health therapist at Du Bois Academy. He's had several years of contract therapy work in the community. He's known on a lot of football fields and basketball fields as Mr. Sparrow, and we welcome Mr. Sparrow to the show. Glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
All right, excellent. So thank you for being here and agreeing to participate in this very important discussion. And let's start by asking each of you to kind of respond to that health fact, that black children as young as 7 years old recognize and are affected by racism. How do you respond to that?
I think back to my own daughter. When she was 4, we had her in gymnastics. And I think by the time she got to 7 or 8, we put her in competitive gymnastics. The following year, she was in there for 1 year in the competitive part. The following year, she didn't want to be in gymnastics anymore. You know, we were confused as to why, but you know, I talked to her. She basically cried. She was like, "No, I don't want to do gymnastics anymore." And then she never really explained it to me. But by the time she got to high school, she said, I felt the racism in the class. Yeah, she was like, I was the only black girl in the class. I was isolated. She said when they ate lunch, when they did snacks, you know, she had to sit by herself. They talked about things that she didn't know, you know, she had no opinion on, and they basically kind of isolated her in the class. And I just thought to myself, you know, that was an opportunity that she had in her life that was kind of taken away because she was unable to vocalize it at the time. And I just think, now, how many opportunities do our kids have in learning situations and whatever situations, and they're not able to vocalize that to their parents.
Excellent. Sparrow, what do you think?
But I think it's to me, it's earlier than 7 when you recognize there's a difference. I know in growing up, we didn't qualify for Head Start, and a lot of my family members did. And so we had to go to private preschool. And we went to private preschool, it's only 1 or 2 in the room. And that's when you realize, oh, my hair, you can't touch my hair. You get speeches before you go in. Don't act like this, don't talk like this, don't respond like this, or you'll be judged. So we were already conditioning our kids very early on not being their true, genuine self in order to.
You know, we all know about stranger danger and you can't speak to everybody, but now there's another weight that comes with that I don't know if our school teachers are ready to really deal with or understand the depth of that weight around people who are authority figures and who demand, by commanding our young people to do things, how that's going to be dealt with by our students.
Did you know that the word alma mater comes from the Latin meaning nurturing mother? One of our primary objectives at Simmons College of Kentucky is to nurture late bloomers. So it doesn't matter if you struggle through high school just to graduate or even if you earn your GED. We don't look at a student's past, we look at their potential. Simmons College of Kentucky, creating the next generation of thinkers.
One of the things that we've talked about before the show started was a little bit about how our children see others in the world now. And in particular, you know, they see many people as a risk or danger. Anybody have an opinion, or how are young people going to handle authority coming at them differently than before this pandemic?
You know, definitely, like, schools have to be prepared, but also I think it's important for our parents to teach our kids the duality of people before they enter the school. People are complex, and it is not just one group of people that we should look at as being bad or being good. Some of those authority figures are actually, you know, good people who are our allies. That, you know, there's a duality there, and individuality that as parents, as people who are going to, you know, be responsible for our kids, that's necessary for us to kind of teach them that, so they can understand, you know, and make their own judgments and decisions individually of the people who they come in contact with.
Right. I get that. And
Yeah.
Aisha?
I think I would say as well, I really hope that our district is preparing our teachers for that. One of the concerns that I have is, you know, with this 1 year break, we can't assume the same currency. And by that, I mean, we cannot assume that just walking in the classroom as an authority figure today with 30 kids, that they recognize you, or that there's that sort of personal connection there, but that this is really going to be a significant period of starting over. Children have had a 1 year break from being in the presence of adults that are really not their parent or, you know, their main caregiver. And so I think there's going to be a long road for teachers to understand that they cannot just come back into the classroom and pick up where they left off. That it's really going to be important for them to rebuild those relationships, understanding that relationship is really the cornerstone to being able to apply any type of authority. So, I mean, I definitely see the potential for concern there if you have teachers, particularly in those really authoritative type settings, that are just going to come right back in on day one and think we're going to pick up on, you know, March of 2020, which certainly I don't think is going to be a very successful way to approach it.
So let me zero in on that because, Aaron, for you, I think, and to her point, and how Ricky kind of led into it, what about those kids who haven't been in school and are coming back? How are they going to take to authority? Because at least the ones that have been involved with NTI have seen faces on a screen, maybe know some of the adults that they'll run into, but what about the ones who haven't been at all? What's that going to be like for them?
Those are my kids. Those are the kids I like. And I'm going to tell you why. Because you can't, it's not, to me.
Be careful when you touch your mic.
I'm sorry. To me, the authority in school, to me, that's fake to me. And I'm going to say it because the kids, to me, are at home and they're still learning. Even though they're not learning on NTI, they're not learning educational material, they're learning whatever YouTube, whatever they want to learn right now, they're learning. And those kids that don't respect authority, they learn people. So I think that it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be if you're expecting to go back in the classroom and everything to be the same, it's not, because kids now have questions. Questions before that they probably couldn't ask or didn't have the courage to ask. But to me, those kids who haven't had the NTI learning very well, much so, have learned people, and they learned that you got to be, to me, you have to be genuine to reach those kids. And I think teachers and school staff need to me, find their people, somebody that can check you when you say this is wrong, the way you approach a child, the way you approach any situation, because I think kids have taken more ownership of their education versus in the past, sit down, shut up, and do the work. They're learning what they want to learn now, and I think that's how we're going to be a greater America.
So when I think about mental health, I think differently than really social-emotional learning. I see social-emotional learning as maybe a more proactive approach where we teach students how to manage their feelings, how to work with their goals, and how to show empathy, good relationships, good decisions. But when I think about mental health, honestly, I think about safety, self-care, and crisis. Should I think that way? Are those the two definitions of SEL and mental health, or is it fall under something else?
I think you're on track with it. I think the SEL, to me, when I get out of SEL, somebody who's going to be a better decision maker. And that's one thing I try to teach and working with the population that I work with, young black men, is try to be a better decision maker in every day and everything that you do. What mental health ties to that, to me, is the feeling behind the decision that you're making. Try to not to be as impulsive as we've learned to be. Try to think outside the box when it comes to making a better decision. But to me, SEL is like the surface, what everybody should have. And I think when it comes to mental health, it gets a little deeper, knowing the why you're so anxious, why you're so angry, what are you afraid of when you're making decisions, like going through daily life. When it starts to stop your daily life from going on, like my anxiety stops me from coming on the show and talking, to me, that's when you need help. You need a mental health. And
so, Ricky, as we go back into school, do you think that schools are going to be approaching both of those topics, social-emotional health and learning, as well as mental health? Do you think they'll have supports in place?
Yes. I mean, I think most schools now, like Aaron, has a mental health therapist in the school. To me, I feel like socio-emotional and mental health kind of intersect each other. And if you're strong in socio-emotional, then when you sometimes, like with mental health, if you're having a crisis, if you're strong in socio-emotional, then you're probably going to come through that crisis better. So if I think it's definitely still important to work with that social-emotional for all kids. And then when kids are experiencing kind of the mental health, the real issues, then we have we have access in schools. As a youth service center person, that's kind of my job, to make referrals to those different agencies, maybe in the community, if they don't want to have it in the school. So definitely, the schools are ready for the mental health aspect, I feel.
That when black teenagers viewed traumatic events online, they had higher rates of depressive and post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Fear, worry, sadness, confusion, and anger are just some of the feelings children can experience due to exposure to videos depicting racially charged violence and civil unrest. Media such as TV, the internet, and social media may include situations ranging from peaceful and orderly confrontations to episodes of violence towards police or protesters. Visual imagery including both inanimate objects like weapons as well as physical interaction are impactful. While all children can be distressed by media coverage of traumatic or racially charged events, children of minority racial groups may be even more impacted.
They took like a big part of our life away from us.
Loved ones of Breonna Taylor grieving.
These children may identify with the people hurt by police, causing worry or fear that they may also be hurt. Or the coverage may reinforce similar experiences in their own lives.
What's up, everybody? My name is Ryan Jones, and I am the host of the program Ryan with a Knee, where we will have candid, honest, hilarious, and sometimes even serious conversations about the topics and happenings that are pertinent to young women and college students like myself. I will be opening up about my experiences as I navigate my way through adulthood with the help of my homegirls, my role models, and of course, God. Please tune in to laugh, learn, and kick it with your girl, Ryan with a Knee. Be sure to join us every week right here or at www.ssclivetv.com on demand. SSC Live TV. Truth, justice, and power. It's TV our way.
Our next fact shares that when black teenagers view traumatic events online, so when black teenagers view viral videos, police brutality, shootings, they had higher rates of depressive and post-traumatic stress syndrome, including things like re-experiencing the trauma, avoidance, numbing, or even hyper-arousal. And I hear that to say our black teenagers in Louisville have repeatedly been exposed to not only nationwide examples of police brutality, but to repeated exposure to the facts, the humanity, and the injustice of Breonna Taylor's murder. So I'm interested in discovering the triggers that lead to that re-experiencing, the avoidance, the numbing, or even the hyperarousal. Will we recognize the signs in our young people when they come back into the schools or while they're in our homes? Will we recognize the signs that say they are in fact traumatized, and how have we maybe recognized those signs? Adisha, anything on that?
I think we're really going through a collective traumatic experience at this time. So you almost have to assume that as your starting point and then work backward from there. I mean, if you happen to be fortunate enough to have, a teenager in your house that's not impacted, that's not traumatized, then good, that's a good thing. But I think it's very unusual at this point, if you really unpack it, to think any of us would come out of what we have experienced collectively and not have some type of trauma associated with that. I mean, and it can be as simple as I'm driving down the street and the police go by, or I'm driving by the street and, someone from my subdivision is flying their Confederate flag off the back of their truck. Things that we see very commonly in Louisville and surrounding areas. So I think it's about recognizing the triggers, empowering our youth to understand that they don't have to watch everything that is being put out there, us empowering ourselves as well to say, I'm not going to watch this. And some of that comes at us so fast. I mean, just in your sort of what they call doom scrolling, before you have a chance to stop, that video is already powered up, oftentimes through your social media and your phone. So I think recognizing the signs, but also giving people an off-road, giving our kids an off-road. I have teenagers in my house. There's an hour of the day where we turn our phones in, adults and kids, just to find those healthy off-roads and other things that you can do besides this repeated exposure that's playing out.
Hey, Ron, what would you like to say in regards to noticing those triggers, and do we notice them?
Yeah, I think we see them, but we see them different. We see kids angry. We see kids that want to fight. So many videos of kids fighting. Right now, a lot of kids are running away from home. You see kids just sitting on the phone, being still, numb, scrolling hours and hours of video games, not wanting to have that human interaction. I think we see a lot of it, but we can't put our finger on what it is. And I think now, since the world has stopped, we can now see what the PTSD, because if you grow up in a certain neighborhood, you've seen PTSD. And I think a lot of young men, black men, have either learned to avoid it through sports, learn to avoid it through finding like activities where they can do, or trying to find a group to where they're not into. Because right now the streets they're pulling our kids in.
Right.
And to me, us as parents are losing kids to the streets because we have to work so much because we don't want to be dependent on that system.
So how do I, as a parent, know the difference between, oh, that's just teenagers, boys being boys, girls being girls, and they're being affected by what has happened over this past year? Will I be able to tell the difference? Will teachers be able to tell the difference? Will principals be able to tell the difference?
Knowing your kids, knowing your kids for who they are. Turning your phone in, that's a great idea. My daughter don't talk to me until she turns her phone in at night. Then I get an hour-long conversation if she wants to talk to me. Turn the phones in, being non-judgmental when kids are talking to you, but also to me it's having that village. Because as a parent, you don't know nothing. A lot of us parent out of fear. We don't know, the kids don't believe you know nothing. You're not cool no more. So having somebody outside the home that can say, hey, talk to me, hey, what's going on, just ride with me to the store. We losing our village, and I think we need that to cut down on the mental health.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I'm still very cool. Okay, so having said that part, we understand about all of the traumatic effects that have been happening and how that's kind of played out with our young people in so many different ways. I guess I'm curious as to what is in place now in our schools that will support our students when they come back. What is actually in place? Because you can't ask for supports in the community if they aren't already in the schools, in the sense of, calling on schools to do something they've never done before. So I know that Maryhurst does a lot of work with their program Renewal that we want you to address. But Ricky, what's involved in schools now? What are they prepared to do when students come back?
Well, I think the first piece is like the teachers have to be prepared. So in preparation for that, we've done a lot of different trainings, just trying to get teachers ready, but understanding that it's still going to be difficult. Just to piggyback off what he was saying was just, kids just find it hard to communicate in general. And now you have kids who've been, out for an entire year without communicating with their teachers. And even those who are engaged oftentimes are, they're just putting words in a chat. They're not like verbalizing language. So definitely it's going to be difficult. But I would say particularly to black and brown students, middle schools and high schools have been mandated to have BSUs, Black Student Unions. You have programs, Women of Worth, you have Men of Quality, you have different programs that are specialized spaces for them to have an opportunity to participate in. And as parents, I would recommend to, encourage your kids strongly to get involved in those things, because that will give you voice. And that will give our kids an opportunity to kind of be able to have an open dialogue and conversation and feel free to have that conversation. Oftentimes in class, even though somebody might be asking them to, speak on it, that's not going to be a comfortable conversation that a lot of them want to engage in. Mm-hmm. So just having those specialized groups, family resource centers, youth service centers, contact them, contact your counselors, and just, inquire about what does each particular school have. I think the one thing I will say is I think our schools try to leave it up to each individual school, but I would say almost you need to have a universal mandate that when those kids first come back, that a lot of those kids have in failing situations, but that conversation needs to happen first. They need to be heard before they're just throw into academics.
Mm-hmm. Because they won't do the academics if they're not heard in the first place.
Yeah.
Aidisha, how does Maryhurst fit into this? What's its role in the community?
So Maryhurst really, I know within our community, has long had that sort of attachment that we are a home for girls, but we are so much more than that. We have an entire arm of our organization that provides wraparound services to families in the community. We provide services in schools, but we are in the community now. We provide therapeutic services. We provide community support services. We go into individual homes and work with families. We also create access for psychiatry services. So this is the opportunity. What we provide to families right now is if you're already seeing in your child, you know what, I don't think this one is really going to be ready to go back to school. I mean, as a mom of 5, you know, I can already tell which of my kids are going to zoom right back into the school and which ones I know they're going to need those extra supports. And what we can do is start to partner with families now, both the parents who are going to experience their own anxiety of putting their kids into these school settings, and that sort of heightened hyper arousal that comes with knowing my child is at risk. Can I trust this teacher that doesn't look like me? You know, we're coming off of a whole different time in our community. And Maryhurst is able to actually begin those services now and wrap around the family. So I'll give you a specific example. We have one family right now that the mom came to us, but it's a family of 4. And each of those family members, each of the children in the household have their own therapy services that they're receiving from a different therapist that's coordinated under one case manager. And that's allowing both the mom to get the she needs, but also all of the individual children, and that care is individualized. And this is the time, I think, for parents to start identifying, you know, my kid hasn't been on screen. I know this transition is going to be difficult for them, and to start to secure those services in advance. And that's what Renewal offers under the Maryhurst umbrella.
Excellent. So I told you, knowledgeable, without a doubt, expertise that has been shared over this last half an hour. We hope, we know that if you were paying attention, you learned something that's going to help you in making that adjustment for your child to go back into the classroom. Or as many of you know that I've advocated, if your child has been successful without going back to JCPS, if your child has really benefited from virtual learning and found that this is in fact how they learn best, that you maybe even consider not sending them back until the fall, if at all. That you make a decision that's best for you and your family. There are supports that are going to be there academically for the rest of our time in school, for as long as that lasts. So there will be options, but make the option that's best for you and your child and your family. I'm Michelle Penix, Principal Penix to most. We were so blessed to have our guests with us. We want you to come back here the same place next week, same time, where we pick up the discussion, the second part of this discussion about mental health in our schools. As always, thank you, and to God be the glory.